The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Welcome to episode 644 of the Wrestling is Real podcast. Thanks for being here with me. It's King of Podcasts here with you as we roll along into post WWE Draft. We're going to talk about that here on the program tonight. Among other things, I also want to talk about what's been going on with AEW and what they've been doing with their show. We'll talk a little bit about that. The dynamite that happened tonight will be a good kind of focus. Do a little preview of Crown Jewel. We'll do a preview of Bound for Glory later this month, actually. And, you know, gotta take a little MLW too because of the fact that Fightland's coming up tomorrow night as I record this. But it'll already have happened by the time we get to that. And I won't have a chance to talk about it because I have not tried to watch spoilers yet. But I know that there are two title changes that happened to the show tonight. I don't know what those are. I'm assuming that means that Alexander Hammerstone won the World Heavyweight title over Jacob Fatu. I don't know. But there's a lot to be said right there. That happened over the weekend. Either which way, let's move along into it. Before I get started, I have to go and talk about when it comes to last week's show and what I said. I want to make sure, nobody made any comments to me about this, but I feel compelled to talk a little bit about what happened last week and my comments about the IWC influence. Because I talked about how WWE is going to just need to ignore the IWC influence. The vocal minority that's been out there on wrestling Twitter, wrestling TikTok, wrestling Facebook, whatever. That they're going to abandon the entire vocal minority that you created to build for a future of bigger box office draws. I know that's what they want to do. They have a different vision now. They're not going to go ahead and fall back to any thoughts of what the base audience is because there's not a base audience anymore. But I want to explain something. I'm not taking a shot at the IWC itself. The bottom line is Vince McMahon and WWE in general with the Attitude Era, because of a need for retaliation, a need of coming back against WCW. If not for WCW, they would have not been forced to go a different route. They would have probably kept the way things were. Or maybe Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were the focus of things, but they were worried about the bigger guys, the characters. They're going back to that thought process again. But what's happening now is that the company's not at the point as it was in 1994, 1995, where they weren't publicly traded. They were privately owned. And any money loss would have really hurt them in the long run, which is what WCW basically did. Took a shot at the bow of the World Wrestling Federation. That's not the case now. There is so much financial security within World Wrestling Entertainment. They're not worried. Not right now. And they have a pipeline to get to. And they're going along and they're letting their broadcast partners give the input. Now, what they're doing isn't so bad. Look, when you have most sports franchises, sports leagues that are run where maybe you don't have so many characters and it's run on real life. Something to be said here about what WWE is trying to do once again is trying to create the big top acts, the big top attractions. That's what they're trying to do. You can see what they're doing with NXT 2.0, regardless of the ratings dropping now back to their support level back at 600,000. But it could drop some more, but we don't know yet. We've only been a few weeks in. We'll talk about NXT 2.0 as well. But what happens is that the audience that did not stay around, as I explained last week, if you didn't stay around, what are you going to do? Right? If there were still the 7-8 million viewers that were watching Raw back in 1999 that were still around, or even the 4 million that might have been watching back in 2012, 2013, if you still had that audience that retained themselves, stayed around and watched the live show 3 hours on Raw and watched 2 hours of SmackDown every week live, that'd be a different story. If that diehard audience was there, that'd be a different story. AEW is a different story altogether because they have an audience that is the mainstay of what they have. They don't have that social media presence like WWE has, that global presence like the WWE has. They don't have that. They don't have the financial. They have the financial wherewithal because they have a billionaire family Tony Khan's family. I said, Khan, they have the family structure there. But WWE is a different entity. Look what they're doing. You got movies. You have loads of merchandise. You have loads of endorsement, and you have loads of, merchandise deals. Using the likeness, the intellectual property to do NFTs, to do video games, to do a lot of things. WWE and their intellectual property has so much value now that even if the wrestling product kind of suffered for a while, like you could stay right now kind of stagnant at this bottom line low threshold of audience right now where they can get up to 1.8 million for Raw and over 2 million for SmackDown. They can kind of work off of that right now and they continue to go ahead and have the promise to build the ratings back up. And regardless, the corporate entities that are basically in control or influencing what WWE is going to do, the corporate money, the investors, the shareholders, and the broadcast partners, the people that have put millions up to billions of dollars into the WWE itself, it's peanuts. What the IWC has been spending on WWE is peanuts, but they're still important because there's an audience that's going to still be that consumer base they're going to use regardless. And so with NBC Universal and with Fox, you see what they're doing where they're repurposing, replacing for various deals when it comes to various products. They're not ashamed to go ahead and have certain stars do custom-made commercials for said products. Doesn't make a difference for them either. They're willing to do it. And then you see the star power of certain stars. They're able to go ahead and do other projects, say like when it comes to a Sasha Banks or a Becky Lynch or a John Cena. You look at all that. Roman Reigns eventually. They're all going to get to that. Let me tell you, when Roman Reigns drops that belt, I'll tell you when he's going to drop that belt. I think it's when he gets a movie deal. When there's a project that comes in his way, and there's some movie that he's going to be brought on, whether it's some kind of an action movie or something he's going to be brought on, that'll be a significant role for him to act in, or a supporting role with someone like The Rock or John Cena, he'll drop the belt then. And before then, I don't think he drops it. But you can have him go right now while he is in his prime and continue to run with this belt right now as the top heel in the company, the top name in the company. With the top female probably being Becky Lynch. But then when you look at it, the more supported of the female of the women's wrestling division, the WWE women's division, is Charlotte Flair. We already know that from how Fox personally wanted to make sure that she was drafted onto SmackDown. The bigger picture is, I said this and somebody actually made a comment and actually really appreciated me saying facts here. The fact that, I got to make sure who did say that to me. I want to go ahead and shout that person out by saying that on my YouTube channel, because I appreciate that person noticing what I'm saying. Well, you know what? There was a comment up there on the YouTube channel, but it's gone. But what happened was somebody put up there and said facts. The fact that I said that the IWC is a vocal minority that WWE has used for instant gratification, and they don't have to subscribe to that model anymore. That's what I said. And it's true. There is such a bigger picture for WWE to do right now. They're thinking outside of the box. The creative product doesn't show you that, but that company is thinking outside of the box. They're looking at other things to secure their future and to build from the product that is. They're looking to explore other things they could do. And what they need to do is they're going to build to promote. They're going to build to merchandise. They're going to build to market. And these are the things that the IWC is only a focus group. Do you understand what the fan base that has been the diehard loyal, that were very loyal to NXT, the Busted Opens of the world, the people that would listen to all the fan podcasters out there? Listen, and I do not say this as a shot. I'm talking about fans that listen to Off the Script with JD from New York, NY206. JD from NY26, Don Tony. They might follow Kevin Castle on Twitter. They might follow, the journalists of the world, the Sean Ross Sapps, the Dave Meltzers, the Mike Johnsons, the Wade Kellers, right? All of those. All of those encompass the fan base that has been loyal and diehard to this product, but they don't bring the level of viral ability that social media does. Before social media, you absolutely needed that audience. Because remember, the Attitude Era in its infancy, that's what happened. And then things did change. And in 2010, we know WWE decided to do that social media initiative, and they decided we're going to have to go after these other platforms. And they have. And by the way, if you look at the content they do now, they are hot and heavy putting out posts and content, fresh exclusive content all across. And there's not a whole lot that's very cringeworthy, if I might say. There's some stuff that I don't care about, but you notice they do a lot of GIFs, they do a lot of posting of videos, they do a lot when it comes to their other social media content, using the bump, using other programming they have. They do it. And it's nonstop. Pound, 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 pound. Lots of graphics, lots of everything. YouTube channel loaded. TikTok, pretty strong on the videos they do now. All of that. Like, your social media presence is huge. Now, they need to be able to go ahead and convert the social media audience that takes the short form, short attention span route. They need to get them to hook them to the programming, or they don't. Because the impressions they make off their content, even though there's not an audience that will sustain to watch 3 hours, if they can get them to just watch bits and pieces, that will be fine. If it helps to count towards the Nielsen numbers. But I'm sure WWE also could say, the Nielsen numbers don't mean anything. Everybody's dropping across the board. It's looking like that everywhere. Networks dropping across, cables all over the place. That's why we have our shows on Peacock, and they do really well. There's all of that. And eventually, I think what will happen is, look, you have people that are streaming the content. For myself, some nights when I'm watching SmackDown, I might not catch the whole show on cable or actually on my network TV. I'm watching it on Fox Now app. Or some people are watching on the USA Network app. Or they're finding another way to watch it. Or just catching clips. They could be doing that as well. They're not necessarily worried too much as they should. Now, the conventional institutional investors, the ones, the shareholders who will get up on the shareholders call when they do their quarterly earnings, they're going to start asking about the ratings. They're going to have to answer that. And Vince always finds a workaround. He finds a way to say something, and he'll find his way around it. But those are the people that he has to answer to. He's not going to answer, nor is the company going to answer to the fans. It's been made clear. Because the fan base they're going to care about is an overall fan base, a growing fan base, a new fan base that will take this commercial mainstream product and they'll make it soar. It'll be just like any other sports league. That's what they want. Remember, too, compared to other sports leagues, they compare to, say, like the NHL doesn't pull like the size of numbers of audiences, but imagine that WWE does. They're not going to pull NBA numbers. They're not going to pull National Football League numbers. They're not going to pull NBA, or they're not going to pull Major League Baseball numbers. Maybe sometimes, but for live content, they're pulling an audience. But they got to do better of creating this audience something that's going to get them much more engaged. And this is where they have to go and do things where the cupboard is bare. And the type of stars that the fans were getting behind didn't pull a high number. And this is where AEW comes in their own issue, where they're going to have to try to find a way to make their product continue to be cool, work with the stars they have, continue to build the younger stars, which they continue to do on a regular basis. That's the formula for them to try to take the audience that has been disenfranchised, right? That's been frustrated by WWE programming. That's what the IWC has to understand. Your vocal minority, it would get heard if you followed AEW, if you followed and supported Impact Wrestling or MLW or NWA. The vocal minority needs to start paying attention to those brands. your influence is not going to be as successful as it will be on the other brands because they are paying attention. AEW, Impact Wrestling, MLW, NWA, they are listening. They want your input. They want to know what you think. The stars they have resonate more with those fan bases. Believe it or not. Just because it's not the major leagues, it's not WWE, well, okay. WWE serves a significant purpose, a huge purpose. As I always talk about with this program, I focus a lot because there's just always a lot to talk about when it comes to WWE, but also we talk about WWE because of the fact of how it affects the other brands. Because we need them, we need World Wrestling Entertainment to continue to be top dog and to surpass and break open a new audience, which will resonate and trickle down to the rest of the feds. That's what's got to happen. For the sake of wrestling in general, we need to see that happen. So the IWC, for what it's worth, you have to understand that you're frustrated, you feel betrayed, besmirched, because of the fact that if you hear a Don Tony or a JD from NY or, pick another show, Wrestling Soup, right? If you hear those shows, Smart Wrestling Fan, are they still out? Yeah, I'm sure they are. If you hear all these shows and they have their complaints, they have their concerns, they have what they feel is the way things are booked. They might have done their own draft picks of who should have been where and what they should be doing. Hey, valid points. But when it comes to the bigger picture, even I'm not going to try to go ahead and try to fantasy book something that I think that the WWE would really use because it's the $1 million idea. I'm not a shark here in Shark Tank. I'm not some entrepreneur that has like some great visionary. I don't pretend to be Vince Russo or Eric Bischoff. All I'm saying is it's the reality of things. I'm trying to put things into perspective. We have to understand that our voice as a collective in the internet wrestling community has changed. The vocal minority needs to focus their vocal efforts in other places. When there is something that is significantly, that will bring a united front, those are the times when WWE is actually listening. But right now, they have a direction. And they are absolutely 110% trying to make changes. There's no doubt about that. You look what they do with the main roster. Now, you have to work with the talent they have. The stars they've had around that have been exposed in front of us for 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, how many stars have we seen now? Would you look back at the video package they did with Big E and with Drew McIntyre, with Dolph Ziggler? That promo to me, yeah, it was just to go and set up a match, but I actually liked that. But it told me a lot about when you forget how long some of these stars have been in the company. When Big E was brought up to the main roster 2013, accompanying AJ Lee, who was blurred out, yes. But you think about the fact that that's the justification why he's WWE champion right now. Because he's been there 8 years. He's busted his ass. So the deserved nature of him being the champion, I totally agree. But the thing is that the response he got, the fact that he was sandwiched into the deal with Bobby Lashley to retain the title. 2 weeks ago, Raw had another horrible rating. But it had to be the draft and seeing all these other stars coming in, basically like a super show, to be able to make that rating pop a little bit and get over 1.8 million viewers again. Otherwise, back down to 1.6 with Big E headlining as your WWE champion. You have to understand that. Because even with the promo he tried to do out there, he needed a supporting cast. He needed the big day. The new day, excuse me. He needed a new day. He doesn't work by himself. He gets a modest very tepid response by himself. But with New Day, they pop like crazy. So unfortunately, now when Kofi Kingston was champion, he was accompanied by New Day. Why they're not putting Big E out there with New Day, that's a different story. They're trying to build him as a single star. I respect that. I understand why they're doing that, but he has to be on his own. If he's still coming out in the New Day gear, it's not working. If he's still basically just an attachment of New Day, it's not working either. And they don't understand that. So keep him on Raw. You do what you're going to do. And then lastly, they just moved to SmackDown. And that's it with him. Oh, it moved on to Goldberg. So lastly, okay, he's going to get moved over to SmackDown. Better off for him. And basically now I look at Lashley losing twice in the cash-in and in the steel cage match where Lashley's the veteran and he's doing the right thing by, tossing the ball to the younger kid, doing the job, getting the other champion over. The problem is that Big E's still not over yet. I mean, Lashley put him over twice. Clean. Sure, you can see a little bit of plunder, but still, with Hurt Business and with the New Day coming out to help, I mean, they still kind of kept everything pretty copacetic. So Big E's had the chance, and he's had wins, but it's not resonating to an audience getting big over him. Like, he's not getting headlines. He's not getting the kind of attention that a WWE champion would get. Bobby Lashley did. And you can't really just use a diversity, equity, inclusion discussion here either. It just doesn't work. And that's the other thing that's got to be said as well. In the agenda that was done with the draft, you could see the makeup and the representation of different races, ethnicities, and cultures was very apparent on what they did with Raw and SmackDown. Let's look at what the draft was. Let's go back to where we are. So the Raw Women's Champion Charlotte Flair moved to SmackDown, and Becky Lynch moved to Raw. Drew McIntyre is now SmackDown, and they took a lot of NXT call-ups, which were not going to be used in the 2.0 project. Either they were going to be let go, or they were just projects that said, well, you know what? These are the ones that we absolutely wanted to bring up to the main roster eventually, because these are the ones that Vince and Bruce and the others that Triple H created said, yeah, we can make something of them. We're going to prematurely bring them up, but we're going to give them a shot because that's just the way it's going to be. They're either going to sink or swim. So the upgraded post-draft rosters, Raw, I'm not going to go through all the names. It's just some of the ones that I see that are like absolutely new. Alpha Academy has moved over. Apollo Crews, Commander Aziz. Becky Lynch. Bianca Belair is now on Raw. Carmella moved over. Dolph Ziggler, Robert Roode, Dominic and Rey Mysterio. So you've really built the tag team division has definitely switched over. And you got a lot of tag teams there now. Edge has moved over. Finn Balor moved over to Raw. Liv Morgan moved over. Seth Rollins moved over. Tegan Knox moved over. Street Profits moved over. Zelina Vega moved over. It's a lot. But there's a lot of tag teams that are still... There's quite a few tag teams right now into the Raw ranks. And you do have quite a few stars that are on top. Like right now, I think Seth Rollins moving to Raw absolutely moves him up as a top heel. I honestly think that he kind of takes the place of what... Now, Bobby Lashley's still there. Well, actually, he's still there. Okay. I almost forgot about that. Bobby Lashley did stay. I thought he moved over. No, he did stay. Bobby Lashley MVP did stay. So Bobby Lashley's still there. They can still keep him somewhere at the top of the heels. And then I think Seth Rollins is right there with them. When you look at the face side, and I guess AJ Styles is like right underneath that, right? But on the top faces you can look at, Edge. And then after that, I guess you have to go to Damian Priest. Like, there's not much after that. But they always keep, faces, the side, the baby faces are always a lighter side than the heels. You already know that. But quite a few tag teams they have over here. So they're going to have quite a few more tag teams to work off of. SmackDown, Aaliyah comes up from NXT. Angel Garza, Humberto Carrillo have moved over. Now, this where you see an absolute makeup of diversity, equity, inclusion. So if you want to talk about a brand that's much more trying to showcase a full world wrestling of entertainment, a real world view of it, Aaliyah, talk about from, that comes in. Angel Garza, Humberto Carrillo. You're bringing Drew McIntyre. Hit Row comes up from NXT, which, for me, if something does happen here, I don't know if anybody else breaks out. Like, I know people want to talk about BFAB, and I don't care about the tag team portion. Shane Swerve Scott is the one person that is the anchor of this group. I need to see him actually act as a leader. I don't want him to just be with the entourage. I don't want this just to be that. I don't want it to be an entourage. I want there to be a leader in this. And I think Shane Swerve Scott needs to start putting his authority down. And where Hit Row, gets a little bit humbled. I don't know how they're going to do this or who they're going to put him up, but we'll find out. Jeff Hardy moves over to SmackDown. That's where you want somebody as a just established star, kind of the replacement of Dolph Ziggler moving over. But Jeff Hardy, given what he is, he still has such a ability. He's still so over. Everybody says that, by the way. Mace moves over. Jinder Mahal and Shanky move over. Mansoor, Mustafa Ali. Ricochet moved over. Ridge Holland has moved up. You got a big guy right there. Shayna Baszler moves over. That's significant. When you look at the women that they have now, it's a bit of a significant look where Aaliyah, B-Fab, Naomi, Natalya, Sasha Banks, Shayna Baszler, Toni Storm, Xia Li. It's a and Shotzi Blackheart, by the way. So it's quite a bit of a change that they have of what they had before. It's of the women they have. It's much more. It's more of an edge. I feel like a much more variety of the stars they have. Meanwhile, when you have most of the stars who are very glamorous. Well, not so much glamorous either. Well, Carmella and Dana Brooke. And, of course, even Marie's over in that brand as well. And Liv Morgan kind of hits on that other end. So the women are much different on that side. It's not so diverse and so widespread as it would be on the SmackDown side. What it looks like to me. Remaining free agents, we still have Asuka, Bayley, Davey Boy Smith Jr., unless he's David Hart Smith again, Elias, Eva Marie, Lacey Evans, Lindsay Dorado, MVP, Slapjack, Sonya Deville, and Titus O'Neil. Which I guess Sonya Deville, I don't know if she's dressing anymore or not. But, oh well. So when you look at the tag teams, look at one more time. 8 teams now that'll make up a lot of time on Raw. AJ Styles, Omos, Alpha Academy, Apollo Crews, Commander Disease, Dirty Dogs, Hurt Business, Mysterios, RK Bro, Street Profits. That's a lot of change around. They can go around different variations of that. And hopefully in right about WrestleMania time, they will not wear all this out quickly. SmackDown with 9, they have Angel Garza, Humberto Carrillo, Happy Corbin, Madcat Moss, Hit Row, Jinder Mahal, Shanky, Mansoor, Mustafa Ali, New Day, Shinsuke Nakamura, Rick Boogs, Usos, Viking Raiders. Definitely a different switch over there. We can see where it goes with that. Women's divisions. You definitely just see, I don't know, I just feel like with what they've done on SmackDown and Raw, you could just tell there's a significant difference on what they're doing right there. In this Bleacher Report article on taking about did SmackDown or Raw win the WWE Draft, they mentioned that both brands suffer from a lack of major star power in their men's divisions. There aren't enough options for Biggie or Roman Reigns to face and sustain a full year without going into rematches. And unless WWE is hoping to quickly boost some names to the next level, 2022 may be a year where even more attention is put on just a few wrestlers, where part-timers are brought up for pay-per-views. Or they're going to have to bring in part-timers to build up for, 8 big shows, most likely next year, they're going to have to go to the part-timers again. Then after that, unless you're able to build some big storylines, really, I mean, you could have something significant coming up for Royal Rumble, which you're coming after. You need something big that can pull off of that. Then WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, we already know you already need all hands on deck anyway. That's normal anyway. But then it's these other shows you're going to have. The show in the UK, or whether it's at Principality Stadium or whether it's at Wembley Stadium. Another 2 more shows at Crown Jewel, right? Or 2 more shows in Saudi Arabia. If you have to deal with, now Money in the Bank at a big venue at Allegiant Stadium. Then you got SummerSlam and Survivor Series in big venues. It's a lot to work off of. And they need to make some real big work with this draft. This is where, as I say over and over again, this is an offseason where it's different than previous years. This offseason had the rollout after the pandemic, and so far, so good. When you have the rollout of the pandemic, the live show's coming back in July, and now we're coming in roughly 3 months into this whole deal. Luckily, there have been no shows canceled, no shows that have really moved around, no major issues to any people contracting COVID. Wonderful. That's great. With that said, we're looking at sustaining the live shows because of the investment they had to put back in, because of the money they had to go ahead where they did layoffs, where they did a whole lot of consolidation that Nick Khan did in order to go ahead and fuel the live events coming back. And all the contracts being laid off, all that money they had to go and they used to inject back into live shows. It's not money they're using that's out of the coffers. It's just reinvesting and repurposing funds in the budget towards something else, towards the live shows. And the fact that the live shows are doing much more bigger venues than before. Because some of their bigger pay-per-views are now going to be in a big deal. Like this, Crown Jewel, they never bothered doing October pay-per-view like it would normally have. No, now we got Crown Jewel. It's a October pay-per-view. I don't know if it stays like that, but there we go. So rest of the year, I'm guessing what? We get Survivor Series and we get TLC. Oh, and we get Halloween Havoc at the end of the month as well. So either which way, it's all built up. Fascinating. So they have this all built up. And this offseason, especially the post-SummerSlam season, Crown Jewel, they have to go ahead and pull all the stops again. They can't slow down. They can't just put it on autopilot. They're not allowed to do that anymore. For them to succeed, they can't go autopilot. The broadcast partners are continuing to make them move. Look what they did. So going from SummerSlam, the offshoot after SummerSlam, to the draft now. And now, immediately after that, King of the Ring, Queen's Crown Tournament. You're building something else to lead up to Crown Jewel, to make a big deal out of that. So you got that going on. To continue to give something to sustain on both SmackDown and Raw to keep the interest level up. That's good. How do you keep that going? What do you do then after Crown Jewel to lead up to Survivor Series? What do you do with TLC and leading up to the Royal Rumble? Like, they have to keep the momentum up. They're out of tricks. All the returns that could have been coming back, they've already come back. Right? Brock Lesnar came back. Becky Lynch came back. Sasha Banks came back again. All that came back. There's nobody left. Again, you want to wait till of the injuries you have. Asuka, Bayley, whenever they come back, that's going to be next year. And there you go. Otherwise, what other big stars do we have left that you can move on over? That can make a big difference and make a big pop. They already did it. They've already done it. They rolled out John Cena. They've done all the tricks they had coming out of the live shows. They pulled them all out in a matter of 2.5 months. And that's it. Then you have this draft. Now you have the tournaments. There you go. So they're pulling as much stops as they can. What they have to do. But there's a lot that needs to be done in order to build. And this is where I think as well, I think NXT 2.0 is going to be aggressively used to build stars that can be pushed right up to the main roster. I think the ramp up, the amount of time to get those stars up and ready, it's not going to be as long as it was before. I don't think we're going to see people in the Performance Center or that are going to make up to 2.0 that are not going to be immediately pushed up. If they feel like there's any inkling, whether the wrestling ability is already on point, they're not even going to, like, I mean, who was it said something, listen to Busted Open, and I heard that Bully Ray and Mark Henry were talking about the fact that, like, if they hear some buzz about somebody who's absolutely killing on a 2.0, well, the WWE is not going to worry about that. They're not going to wait. They're not going to have the patience. They don't have the patience. They can't do that right now. They have to find new stars to build. And they're doing some things to try to help fix up some of the stars they have and try to kind of, work on their characters. They've done some retweaking of characters. You've seen some of that as well. I mean, just in the last year, some of the changes they made during this time that they've had. Alpha Academy's made quite a few changes. Apollo Crews made a lot of changes. Becky Lynch going heel, making a lot of changes. And it's not necessarily where they have a lot of young stars who are just building up that are really young. I mean, Dominic Mysterio is probably the youngest on the roster, and, that's off of nepotism, basically. But then you see the changes. Karrion Kross getting a change in character. Keith Bearcat Lee getting a change in character. Nikki ASH. Seth Rollins moving more out of the Monday Night Messiah into more of this maniacal ha-ha-ha kind of character again. And changing up. And you see Happy Corbin. A refocusing of Shayna Baszler back to what she was at NXT as the Ace of Spades. Shinsuke Nakamura bringing him King. Bringing Rick Boogs into the picture. Bring him back up. And you think about the Usos and the change they made, being part of Bloodline along with Roman Reigns and that whole story being told. There's a lot of things that they did to move things around and to really start changing things up, trying to create more character base, some more depth. So that it's not just some everyday person. That the stars they have in here are box office big top attractions. That's what they're trying to pull. So now Bleacher Report reports here that Raw edges the victory in this year's draft. It's not a total blowout. SmackDown does have a healthier tag team division, but there's far more variety on the Red brand. It's hard to imagine SmackDown is going to be running short of challengers for Reigns and Flair by the time WrestleMania 38 has concluded, if not before then. The stretch from April through October could be a bumpy ride for Fox. But then WWE should probably shuffle the deck again with some trades from time to time to avoid the new rosters getting growing stale. That's not going to happen. Plenty of superstars could jump from NXT to Raw or SmackDown to help with the influx of talent. That's not going to happen either. If anything's going to change on these two rosters, they're going to keep the brand extension. The brand split's going to stay. They're going to stick to it. If there's anybody new coming in, they're going to move from NXT up. That's what they're going to do. And, the fact they put Gable Steveson, the Olympic gold medalist, into the mix here, I don't even know how they're going to use him. But we know there's probably other things they got planned out. Who knows? Who knows what other stars they might pull into the mix that'll be brought back in? Who knows if Tyson Fury wants to come back? If they'll bring him back in after all, with the go after Drew McIntyre at the UK show. If they decide to do that. Who knows what they would do? Who knows? And we also know that we have to see what they're going to do in terms of building up storylines and all to get things going up to the end of some feuds that have to finish up because of the draft. Like, that's one thing we have right now is we're going to get closure at Crown Jewel of a number of feuds. That's going to make a difference. Plus, we have to find out if certain titles are going to get switched around from the Raw to the SmackDown brand because a certain star is moving over to the other brand, whether it's Raw or SmackDown. That's got to be considered as well. We'll keep an eye on all that. Let's see what they do. But to me, what they did with the draft, I do feel like what they wanted to do was they definitely wanted to go ahead and a refresh was really what the draft was of what they have. And with what they did, I mean, it's going to help. Like, we know that they're not going to build up on the storylines, but then you hope that they could do something to help build characters. And then you look what they're doing with NXT 2.0 and what they're building off of that and where it's going. I want to take a story about that because we need to go and talk about 2.0 in the context of where it's going to be now and where they're going to be and what's going to matter to them. Last Word on Sports put a story out about NXT still finding its footing. So we know the ratings that they had before leading into the end of the NXT era that everybody felt like, oh, is dead now, right? The ratings didn't do that well. Again, we saw it plateaued. It stayed at a certain spot and did not go anywhere else afterwards. So that was a concern. And same thing could be said with Rampage. Other shows, you can say the same thing as well. When you look at the shows and what their audiences are right now, NXT 2.0 has been 3 weeks, and they have had a decline. Now, it has not reached the low decline. The base mark, the baseline of the show, if it goes back to where it was before, is 601,000. That was the lowest level that NXT had after SummerSlam, which is a good indication for them. But then before that, and you can't count the shows that were during the Olympics because those numbers were just not significant. But overall, and even to say that like there was some significant change because of 2 weeks it was not on, even though Dynamite went through the same thing, can't really use that as a benchmark. But the NXT numbers, when you look at it, after WrestleMania, and I've said this before, stayed around 700,000. They stayed. And then they have some dropping off, like what after? Right around Great American Bash? And but continued to decline. Olympics came through. They were hurting on that. And sure, you still had Capitol Wrestling Center and the way that whole place looked. All that kind of changed as well. But then back in front of some crowds again. Well, they still had the same thing with the crowds. But the ratings suffered. And now this changed to the NXT that we have now today. Initial interest held at over 750,000 viewers. Significantly more than what they've had for a while. And there's been a drop-off. But I still think there's going to be something where NXT will find its way back somewhere back in the 650s to the 700,000 range. So with all the releases they made and what they did, they're going to have a new crop of stars here. Not all of them. Like, Gargano and Dunn and Ciampa and Grimes and LA Knight and all those. They're still going to be around. But, I mean, it's going to feel like it's kind of crappy, sure. Colorado's still there. But, the loss of Bronson Reed or other stars they had in there, Samoa Joe no longer on there, but of course he's injured. Like, there's just a lot of things where, and we don't even see Steven Regal anymore. Like, there's a whole thing now where they made the full change with 2.0, and so far it looks like it's going to sustain. Now, we'll see if they drop. If it goes below 600,000, then we have something to talk about. I don't think that's going to happen. There's enough people still talking about it. People that said they weren't going to cover it, they're still covering it, right? That's what they're going to do. You look at Raw, they constantly had some issues. The Thunderdome always had some lower numbers. But then when they came back to shows, you look at July 15th to July 22nd, almost 2 million viewers, and then it go 1.8, 1.8. Oh, leading up to SummerSlam, 2 million for post-SummerSlam, and then 1.9, 1.8, and then it had a bit of a drop-off. And that was after the Big E championship run. The start of his championship run, where he was hoping he would go and anchor the level of the audience, but it dropped off. It dropped off. And because of the draft, because of what they did with some matches they did to try to build things back up, they got things back up to 1.8 million and then 1.7, and now they pulled back over 1.8 million again. So, unfortunately, Big E and his title reign, if they're just focusing on him, only resulted in Thunderdome level ratings. It's not a knock against them. This company just didn't do the right job of building them up. But they're not going to do that anymore. They're not going to worry about trying to build stars and do the right thing by having them win and have a winning streak and a momentum coming across so they can get to a certain point. They're not going to do that now. They're choosing not to. How unfortunate. But that's their choice. It's what they feel like they want to do. Oh, well. It's too bad. With SmackDown, different story. Since the crowds came back, 2.3 to 2.1 million viewers. They're holding steady for the most part. And they're going to keep things that way. New fall season, this and that. They did what they needed to do. They're putting a lot of effort now to try to keep the audience stimulated, interested, and sticking around to watch on Friday nights. And then you got to ask yourself, do you think that maybe a little bit of Rampage being on afterwards kind of helps out a little bit to make sure the ratings don't drop off too much? And so far, Rampage has kind of been, they've had what they've done. And so far, their ratings have stayed at a certain amount as well. Now, since the move where they brought in CM Punk, you look at, they were pulling near 1 million viewers and stayed over 1.1 to 1.3 million viewers across the board. They continue to do that. So the changes they made have helped them to build up as well. And so every show's building up across the board. And that's the waterline they have to stay at. They have to all keep going up. Even when you look at Impact Wrestling, okay, we don't talk much about their numbers, but they were hurting a little bit. They've had a couple numbers that have been not so well, but right now, they're definitely holding over 100,000 viewers regularly on Access TV. And with all the changes they made, also with their own bringing back fans after Slammiversary. You look at them, except for one blip where they had 98,000 viewers, because I think it was something about the DirecTV, some kind of issues with Access TV and watching it. Between 110 and 120,000 viewers. Because now they got a crowd in the arena, no longer having that show where there's nobody in the arena. Now you at least got a small studio audience. And after Bound for Glory, now you're going to actually get the Sam's Town crowd. That's going to have a nice big crowd in there. You'll get hopefully about 1,000 people into that venue, or 800 people or something like that. A much bigger crowd for all the tapings they do for Sam's Town, for Vegas at that show. Back to the way they were before. That'll be great. So that's going to help them up, because I think just seeing that crowd back out there really helps all these shows to get a little bit more engaging in what they're doing, and also having a lot of new stars they continue to bring on in there. And no matter what, if it's Kenny Omega or if it's Christian Cage holding the belt, it's a different story. But right now, things are holding up pretty good. And Bound for Glory is coming up in a couple of weeks. They have a lot of things to be looking forward to. And who knows? We might see them pull off a coup in signing somebody. They could get Braun Strowman. I know people are not saying that Bray Wyatt might not come to Impact Wrestling, but I think you have to think this with AEW, they just can't pick up everybody. And so Braun Strowman, yeah, they're not going to fit him in AEW, but why wouldn't? If he wants to continue to work in other places, why not get back on TV? Why not be Impact Wrestling? What is so wrong about Impact Wrestling taking some stars? Some of the podcasters out there, they still want to go in and look at Impact Wrestling as TNA. They're not. As far as I know, what I've been looking at with their roster now, some of the stars they brought in, they've continued to build up W. Morrissey, the former Big Cass. They are doing some work right now with Brian Myers. They're getting somewhere with him and having his entourage, kind of going the Kevin Nash route. When Kevin Nash was taking care of the X Division for a while, which was pretty funny. And then looking at the usage of Christian Cage and its importance in there, and continue to build stars. Like right now, the Golden Boys, Josh Alexander, they pulled the Option C deal, which has worked effectively for a number of stars, say Chris Sabin or Austin Aries, because it worked. So the fact that they did the Option C was really cool. And then Battle for Glory, you have a tournament to go ahead and determine a new X Division champion and a possible change of the title where Christian Cage could drop the belt to Josh Alexander. And I think they're going to do it. I think they have a whole lot of faith in Josh Alexander. They feel like he is the future of Impact Wrestling. They want to give him the rock. They want him to run with it. And Josh Alexander's been great. Walking Weapon's been awesome. So let's see if he can be given that shot. They even put Ace Austin in there to the mix, but they're not ready to pull the trigger on him, nor are they willing to pull the trigger on Moose either. And Sami Callihan, unfortunately, is injured, so they have to find somebody else that's going to take a spot. So all of that, Impact Wrestling's got a momentum. And not to mention also, they can do the Knockouts Knockdown. They also have an incredible division, a roster of stars, especially on the women's side. Incredible roster of stars. By the way, I do love the announcement that Tony Khan made. We now have a women's secondary title, the TBS Championship. I actually like the belt. And they keep talking about the January 5th, 2022 is the debut of Dynamite moving over to the Superstation TBS. And I will just keep calling it Superstation because that's what it is to me. Superstation TBS. That's good stuff. I meant to go back to NXT 2.0. I've already made some comments about it, but I'm going to take a couple of things they said right now. So we know that Braun Breaker and Tommaso Ciampa are going to go after each other at Halloween Havoc, October 26th. So they're building it as a show that's going to be 2-hour event, pay-per-view. So probably the takeovers are not going to come back for a while, if at all, which will be fine. And so far, some of the things that have changed. Toxic Attraction, the stable. Raquel Gonzalez is now a face. That's effective. That's good to see how she turns out as a face. Toxic Attraction, to me, it's been done before. It's Beautiful People or the Dollhouse. It really is. But Mandy Rose, she's finding herself into this role. And I love Gigi Dolan, the former Rebecca Kelly. So I think they could go somewhere with this. Fortunate Frankie Monet took a loss going after the NXT title. They're not looking at her as somebody that could hold the belt. Not right now anyway. My thing is I think Frankie Monet is going to probably get moved up to the main roster eventually. I think that's somebody you see after WrestleMania. Taya Valkyrie, to me, I don't think she ever should have been in NXT, but I get it. But it's just like how Karrion Kross was only around for a short time. I think Frankie Monet moves up quickly. Just my whole thing. So we know Mandy Rose and Raquel Gonzalez will probably go ahead and be fighting for the belt pretty soon. Then you have now the new, the reluctant partnership of Von Wagner and Kyle O'Reilly. I know people just for Von Wagner and just this guy. We haven't really seen much of him and really had much to work off of. Like, we need more time to see Von Wagner in the ring, much more camera time, because I know they want to bring some stuff behind him. Pete Dunne with Ridge Holland. Like I said, Braun Breaker, Tommaso Ciampa is being booked very well. I love it. 2 names, I think, guarantee they're going to be up to the main roster by WrestleMania. After WrestleMania, Raw after, SmackDown after, Braun Breaker, Frankie Monet. I think those 2 immediately move up. And I think Raquel Gonzalez absolutely moves up as well. I think those are immediate call-ups. I don't know about Ridge Holland. Listen. And Tony D'Angelo had a good appearance. He's cut good promos. His introduction has been pretty good. I like that. But there's also a lot of stars that are just like, you're not going to see much of them. I don't see Dexter Lumis or Indy Hartwell making the way up. Cora Jade making her way up. No. And there's just a lot of stars that you're trying to bring into the NXT fold that is kind of going with the ideas of how CJ Parker was made or Adam Rose and all this kind of stuff. Like, oh man, they're going with some of this hinky, cringeworthy stuff again. Joe Gacy, I don't know if that's going to pan out or go anywhere. And there's just some stars, I don't know if they make their way up or not. I don't know if Cameron Grimes makes his way up or LA Knight makes his way up. I think LA Knight should go up, but I don't think they're going to do it. They have a thing against him, something. I don't know. My thing is that the Cameron Grimes and LA Knight, somewhere at some point, they will be dropped off. They'll be released at some point. And they'll see themselves back somewhere else. I don't know. I don't see much after that. Dakota Kai has not been said much, but we can see her also being pushed up because we know she's not on NXT 2.0. We haven't seen her. She could absolutely go and move up to the main roster as well. There are some NXT names that we could see that were on the black and gold brand that have not been brought back. They're not part of the 2.0 era, and they might just get moved up to the main roster after all. Or dark, or just, whatever. There'll be dark matches, something like that. Who knows? But they're going to go in some different routes with that. That's okay. So I talked a little bit about Crown Jewel. The matches already have so far. They got some pretty good matches so far. Let's just say that. Universal titles, Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. I mean, that's just building up for a long time. It's going to be good. Becky Lynch versus Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair. And what did I say last week when it came to seeing which stars would move over? What did I tell you? Who was going to go to Raw? Bianca Belair, Street Profits. And they did. I thought Bianca Belair moving to Raw was the right place to go. And if obviously with Bianca Belair and Montez Ford, you had to move the Street Profits with them. Makes sense. And Bianca Belair now in the division with the women, based on what they're going to do. Like, it's still going to be weird you can have Becky Lynch over on the Raw side when I think Becky should have stayed over on the SmackDown side, but I get it. Because now you have Becky Lynch no longer as a face. She's got to be a heel. That's what they're going to do. So, don't know. Then you got Shayna Baszler in the mix. So it's a little bit out of the loss right there of what they're going to do. And you got Carmella, and Liv Morgan. It's like there's a lot difference there. So Bianca Belair will flourish over on that side, especially when it comes to the Raw side. I think, seeing her as Raw Women's Champion in that division with the talent they have there could absolutely work. But she would get lost with Charlotte, Sasha Banks, and others in there, what they're doing, I feel like. Oh, and Shayna Baszler, and among others. It's going to be much different. Other matches, Raw Tag Team Championships, RK Bro versus AJ Styles and Omos. So we're going to rematch there. That's all right. Big E versus Drew McIntyre. And so Drew on the way out to SmackDown. Drew McIntyre going to do the deed for Big E for this championship. I feel like that's what's going to happen. No holds barred, Goldberg versus Bobby Lashley. Let's just get Bobby Lashley. Should not be losing. Should not be losing. And I hope Goldberg does not lay another egg at this show like he has. I mean, just even before of, having to use Dolph Ziggler back out there to kind of give some redemption after a crappy match with Undertaker. I'd imagine going back to Riyadh for Goldberg to leave some bad memories for him, so he's got to worry about that. We'll see what happens. Bound for Glory coming up at the end of the month. I'm looking excited for that. Great matches they got on the card, too. Damn. Really good stuff so far. So you have a 6-way tournament final. They now have a new digital media championship. I didn't talk about this yet. So this is basically the Zack Ryder idea of the Internet Championship. So I'm not going to necessarily put it out where all the matches are going to be on Impact Wrestling on a regular basis. It's going to be on Impact Plus. So having an own standalone title. And there will be a tournament to crown the initial champion. Finals will be at Bound for Glory. The first champion will be crowned. But then you can watch the matches individually on Impact Plus. Airing first on Impact Plus and for Impact Wrestling Insiders on YouTube. So there you go. And so far, we already had matches that have gone on that had John Skyler taking on Ziggy Dice. Ziggy Dice from NWA fame. Hernandez against Crazy Steve. And there's others going to be added on. So they got that to move along. We'll see how that works out. And they're going to have a 6-way match to determine the first ever Impact Digital Media Champion. Christian Cage against Josh Alexander, Impact World Title. This just looks like fun. Hope they have a nice long match together. And I hope Josh Alexander gets the win this time around. Deonna Purrazzo, Mickie James, Impact Knockouts title. Great story being told going back to Empower and NWA. Call your shot gauntlet match so far. Rich Swann, Brian Myers have already called in. I believe Ace Austin's gotten there as well. I forget who else has gotten to that match. But there's a number of names. Call your shot gauntlet. And the winner receives a trophy and a contract they can invoke any time within 1 year for a championship match of their choosing. And then you got a 3-way match for the vacant X Division Championship. So, Trey Miguel, Black Taurus, Petey Williams, Steve Maclin. Well, actually, we have a tournament right now to determine who's going to go after that belt. So right now it's Trey Miguel versus Black Taurus, Petey Williams, or Steve Maclin versus, to be determined in a tournament final, a 3-way match for the X Division title. That should be awesome. We'll see how that works out. A lot of good wrestling coming up. And I'm looking forward to it. Like, again, there's so much going on. And also, MLW Fightland. I don't want to look at the spoilers. I'll talk about that next week, most likely. But I'm looking forward to seeing it tomorrow. But I'm not going to spoil it here. Hopefully you guys will listen to it, or you'll find it out yourself and you'll get to watch it. I know I'm looking forward to it. I'll go look for Vice TV finally and watch it after Dark Side of the Ring. That'll be fun. Leave it there. Going to go see No Time to Die at the theaters. That's how my weekend's going to go. Thank you for listening, as you always do. Any comments, whether it's on the YouTube channel, please leave them there. Follow, like, share, and subscribe to my channel, King of Podcasts, on YouTube, where you can go ahead and check that out for yourselves. WrestlingIsReal.com is the website. You want to go look for the show itself. You want to find all the links that you need for social media and everything else. Go look for it right there. And more importantly, come back to the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at WrestlingIsReal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.